Back from exec, we're going to start our open session, and we're going to start with the pledge, as we always do. And I'm going to make Brad.
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome back to us, and welcome everyone. We are a little bit late because we've been, we started open session whenever we get done in the exec session, Dr. Brown, and we're done. We did the pledge. And perhaps there's a modification to the agenda.
There's one modification that I'm aware of. I want to add language of a resolution, and I'm looking for the exact spot where it's going to go. It is going to be school district business, so it's going to be 12.6. And it's printed here, although we have altered it with a date. So it'll be the resolution that's been uploaded to board docs.
Very good. Without objection, we'll add that. And there's nothing else, correct? We're good? All right, so we'll move on to public comment period. And we have some folks that would like to speak with us tonight, and we're glad to do that.
First up is Marjorie Olds.
So I'll sit here.
Please sit.
I need to sit. Thank you. So I'm Marjorie Olds, and I've lived at 100 Renzetti for the past 30 years, which is right below South Hill Elementary School, which we love. And it's great to be here tonight. I haven't been to a school board meeting since my last kid was in school. And we have 6 grown kids, and we have 6 grandchildren. And we love living near the elementary school, but also the trail, South Hill Recreation Way. And I'm here tonight to urge you to support South Hill's request for a stop sign at the intersection right below the school. Every day, 365 days a year, people are darting past cars coming up and down Hudson Street while they go to the trail. Students, their teachers in the good weather, older students even late at night in the summer, bikers, hikers, baby carriage pushers, dogs, and there's nothing to stop the traffic. And about 20 years ago, I started asking the South Hill Civic Association was started by Susan Strauss, very glamorous principal. She and I organized, and we've had great leadership ever since. But the thing is, now there's some money in the city of Ithaca for traffic calming, and we've never had any feedback from the school district. We've talked to the PTA and principals. They've all been really lovely principals, but nonetheless, they haven't weighed in. So this is your big chance. A year ago, when I heard there was money, I went out by the intersection, by the entrance to the trail, and in a few hours, I got 100 signatures. I see kids running up Hudson Street from the feeder streets, and some have parents with them, some don't. And then they wait for the cars to stop, and the cars don't stop, although there's a crosswalk. But on a night like tonight, 4:30 in the afternoon, you don't see it. And the kids dart between the cars, or the parents stop the cars, and on their way home they run to try and back their cars out. But because there's nothing to stop the cars coming down, it's tricky. And I went up to the after school, same story, and after school, really popular, lively program. When it gets out, kids are running down the street to go home with or without their older siblings, and it's the same story. So I delivered, I'm not sure who's the board now, I guess all the folks with the name tags. I've delivered a couple of the various notes and emails I've gotten from the stakeholders. And the bottom line is that if a child, anyone is injured at that intersection, as Oak Hill Manor's director said, it's an intersection It's just an accident waiting to happen. When there are lawsuits, as there are, when there are serious injuries or deaths, they're not gonna sue the neighbors. They're gonna come after the major stakeholders. And everyone is on notice now. Town of Ithaca, City of Ithaca, we chatted with Pete Tyler at IPD, Oak Hill Manor, Ithaca College. And stop signs are really small interventions. And so I'm here to ask all of you to please weigh in as the school board that you want enhanced safety for the families that go to South Hill Elementary School. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? I mean, we'll move
Sure.
on right to the other folks, but what has the city of Ithaca said?
Let's
I mean, it's
see.
their
Over the
their
years,
streets, right?
first they hired one traffic engineer and then another traffic engineer, lots of engineers, and they keep saying it's under study. And only recently, when I decided, what the heck, I'll get home from work and go to a few meetings, once I started sending in letters from the various folks I spoke to, they said, it's now under reconsideration. But the thing is, like I said, 20 years now we've been talking about it, and the neighborhood has fewer and fewer owned by the owners live there, and more students who bring more and more cars, and just the traffic flow has expanded exponentially.
No,
And the
thanks, Mark.
school board is, everyone respects the school board, and what you say really counts.
We'll see if that's true.
Well, thank you very
thank you, Mark.
much. So good to see you. Such a good feeling.
Eileen Buck.
If you don't mind if I remain seated here, I've injured my knee. So I came to speak tonight to members of the school board in particular regarding the planned migration of retirees who opted to remain with Blue Cross Blue Shield. An involuntary migration, and there are a couple of things I'd like you to consider before you take a vote on that. I've written it down before Alzheimer's sets in here. So as we've grappled with holding on to Blue Cross Blue Shield as the current administrator of the self-funded Ithaca City School District Health Program, it occurred to me that you fail to understand our reasons for this. You presented everything in terms of cost savings, but if it took only money to make us whole, then we likely would have migrated to the Hartford plan with no premium, rather than continuing to pay our premiums that were established when we retired. If it took only money to make us whole, then we likely would have jumped at the chance to eliminate the copay that we currently have as established at the time we retired. In fact, if we needed only money, we probably wouldn't have chosen to become teachers and care for your children. So I'm urging you to please listen to us when we tell you we desire the security of remaining with an entity known and respected worldwide that says, here's an 800 number, call us 24/7, we are here for you. And not a company whose office closes at 5 p.m. and leaves a recorded message on their 800 number that says, our office is closed now, with no indication of when it opens again. So there's very little security in relying on such a company. That difference is pretty stark to me. I also would urge you to please listen to us that we work best when we can trust others. And although you continue to urge us to trust that we will make you whole when Hartford falls short, as it has, it's difficult to trust when you've presented your plans to move us involuntarily after we signed a 7-page document, initial 39 places, notarized, etc., to retain our Blue Cross Blue Shield. We were told it was irrevocable. Bingo. Just kidding? So I really would like you to consider that very carefully. The other thing I'd like you to consider is that I know Paul Mintz, the former Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, sent a letter to the board, which you should have received by last Tuesday, and he, who has the financial acumen that I lack, noted that there is a rather lack of meaningful cost savings from the Hartford plan, in addition to some other contractual issues. Paul Mintz is highly regarded. I think that he really knows what he's talking about when he takes a look at these figures. And as a retiree, he certainly has had plenty of time to look at closely. So before you should take a vote on this, please remember, we counted when we signed that document that we would be able to retain our Blue Cross Blue Shield administrator. It's important to us. Not so much for the minor savings and where the district would jump in when Hartford falls short, but for that security of a company that we know we can count on. So, thank you for your time.
Mary Teresa Pasquale? Hello.
In the 35 years that I taught at Ithaca High School, I certainly taught history. But I also hope that I taught ethics and the proper way of living your life. My parents taught me to keep my word. My parents told me to be honest. I hope that students learn those lessons from me. And what I hope tonight is that you will think in your conscience what is the best vote that you would like to cast. Thank you.
Denise Gelberg? If I pronounce names wrong, please forgive me.
Did Frank go next?
Sure. Frank Slattery, I'm saying it so it can be recorded.
Yeah,
That's all.
Frank Slattery, a retired teacher, and I want to take a few minutes, if I can, to just share with you my feelings about what's going on with the health insurance. I retired from I've had a wonderful career in the Ithaca schools. I loved it. I was here for 37 years. I had kids like this, and it brings back a nice feeling tonight to come in and see that, because they produce the best. When I retired, the one thing I looked at more probably than anything was my health care package. It is a good one, and I don't want to give it up. And when I retired in the year 2000, and I came back on a number of years to work in the district, but when I retired, that was very, very important to me. And 2 years ago, I was pronounced dead on arrival, so I had some firsthand experiences, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield got me through it to a large measure. And I'm here. And a year ago, I got a letter saying that we want you to come down and look at something called the Hartford. And I did that. But I had this contract that went way back to 1980. And I looked at the Hartford plan. I looked at it carefully. I went to 2 of the meetings. I talked to people. I talked to other teachers. I talked to people here. And it wasn't for me. And it wasn't for me because I knew what I had. I had a proven thing that was so good that I didn't want to change it. And after going through all of that, I was given one of these with 39 or 37 statements on it that I had to initial, and I know you're all familiar with that, and got it notarized, and I wanted to make sure that I had it sent, and it's going to come back with return receipt to make sure I had my health plan that I cherished. November 1st, I got a letter that shocked me. And after signing this and understanding it and signing off on the plan that I should have taken, I got a letter saying that, how you doing? Second paragraph, too bad, the Hartford is really good. Third paragraph said, by the way, you're now in the Hartford as of February 2019. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a judge, but to be quite blunt, I think I got screwed. I'm getting the short end of the stick here. I'm being told You had collective bargaining, you had a teaching contract, we had rights as teachers, and now you're changing the rules on me. I don't want them changed. I want what I signed into in 2000 when I retired. After 37 years, I was making $55,000. The best part, the best thing I had is the health insurance. And now you're telling me I can't have it in 3 months. That's not right. I'm going to end it with this, and I just thought of that from looking at you guys, the 6 kids here. When I taught school, I know this. To be effective as a teacher, you got to have trust. And I spent the first 2 days every year of my teaching, 15, 20 years into it when I realized it, that you got to establish trust. You got to trust me, and I got to trust you. And right now, this school district isn't living up to your side of the bargain. I want to keep what I was entitled to, what I was guaranteed through collective bargaining, and I don't think you have the right to take it away from me. As I said, I'm not a judge or lawyer, but I don't think I'm wrong here. And I think you got to look hard and fast at it, and for the people who chose to stay with it, honor your commitment. So that if I have trust with this young man, if I had him as a student, or with you as a school board member, we want to be able to look each other in the eye. And to look each other in the eye, honor the contract. Thank you.
So does that mean Linda Slattery should go next?
I guess. Mine is just a small point that everybody's kind of hit them hard when we were here last week and heard some more about the Hartford. And the big, we were constantly reassured, don't worry, it doesn't, if it falls short, the language that Frank used, you used the word gap. If something wasn't covered, just call me up, people gave us phone numbers and everything, we'll take care of it. The plan was supposed to be equal to or as good as what we're offering, just the very frequency of how much that was mentioned, that we're gonna make you whole, we're gonna fill the gap, kind of made us feel that this certainly is not an equal plan. It's certainly not as good as the one that we've been so secure with since we've retired.
Now, Mary Teresa. Or who?
Thank you.
Oh, Denise, yeah.
I'm Denise Gelberg. I taught in the district from 1976 to 2006. I was vice president of the ITA. I negotiated a number of contracts for the teachers over the years. I also have my doctorate in industrial and labor relations from Cornell and a book on school reform. So I think I speak with some background about this contract. Unlike most districts where it was past practice and customary to give retirees, allow them to stay on the insurance that the active employees had, Ithaca chose to codify it in the contract. So, Article 24, Section A describes what the employee's health insurance program will be. Of course, it's evolved over the time. It says it can't be any worse than this plan from 1981. It's gone through many iterations, but it's always been a platinum indemnity plan, not a supplemental Medicare plan, but a platinum indemnity health insurance plan. If you go to Section C of Article 24, it explains how retirees can stay on that plan, the district's plan for active employees. It gives all the different rules. There's the pre-2003 teachers who only need 10 years of experience to stay on the district's health insurance plan for the rest of their life, and how much they'll pay. And then if you come after 2003, then you have to have 20 years of experience in the district before you can stay on the district's health insurance plan. It seems to me that this is pretty clear that what you're attempting to do by moving retirees who have chosen, and I signed mine 39 times and also said, I understand that this and all items listed have been portrayed as being equal coverage by the district's representative, but I personally do not believe it is equal. A Medicare supplemental plan is very nice, it's just not a platinum indemnity plan. And what we have currently is if Medicare does not cover something, which there are many things that Medicare doesn't cover, our Blue Cross indemnity plan would step in and cover it for these retirees who've chosen to stay with this promised contractual benefit. If you choose to renege on this contract, breach this contract, we will have no choice but to seek injunctive relief. Thank you.
The last time I'm having trouble reading, Leslie,
I'm sorry, Morning Sky.
thank you very much.
Okay, I'll have a broken knee soon. I'm really appealing to your integrity, district members, board members as well. If this had happened to you, if you've gone to meetings, if you were assured that you had a choice, and in fact, if you were told at those meetings that in order to make that choice, the district would require you to sign this document, long document, lots of things needed to be initialed on it. But that once you had done that, you were giving up any possibility of ever going into the Hartford. You were told point blank that you're giving that up if we made this choice, that there might be costs that would be greater to us, but that we would accept that. If you'd been told that, and then you'd signed the document, and you took it to your own lawyer, which I did, I was notarized it, and I sent it into the district, and I thought, oh, all right, I'm willing to accept the extra cost, but I've made the choice. And I thought it was settled. And then I get a letter the next year saying, well, we decided we're going to put you in the Hartford plan. How does that happen? That we have a binding agreement, but the district does not. What was that we signed? If it had happened to any of you, what's happened to us now? I'm asking for you to vote tonight with integrity, with some sense of, honestly, what would I do in a situation like this? How would I vote? What was that commitment that was made? It is very mysterious to all 62 of us because we've never had an explanation. We were just told, without ever referring to that plan at all, that we were being moved. Please think about the integrity of this. There's got to be something inside all of you that knows that something's wrong here. And I'm asking you to reach in that far. This is beyond politics. Please, think about it. It isn't the right thing to do. These 62 people made an agreement with the district, and the district should be honoring that agreement. And there shouldn't be this battle going on. That's really what I'm hoping is going to happen tonight.
That's everyone that signed up. Anyone else wish to speak at this time? And if not, we'll move on. And I'm going to do student reps in a few minutes, but I think board responses, if you wish, at this point.
The health plan is on the agenda.
Rob, go ahead.
I just have one question, but it looks like Judge has already left. I wanted to know if there's a light at the intersection,
No,
which we're speaking about.
there's a stop sign and a red light at the next intersection down the hill.
That's what I thought. At the intersection she's talking about, let me just say, on a night like this, I could very easily take out one of the kids she's talking about. He was getting over to see, it's dark. And because you know the next stop sign on the right is coming, I tend to be one of the people who go a little faster with that intersection.
Add that to the agenda. Do we want to add a discussion about the stop sign to the agenda?
Tonight, or?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to instruct the superintendent to send a letter on our behalf, do we want to add it to the agenda?
Sure.
So,
No, I think that.
Rob asked a critical question. I mean, it's a city, right? We're only going to be trying to
All
push.
we're doing is asking.
And what is it, what's the cross street, it's Hudson and what?
I can't remember what it is, but it's one that,
Renzetti.
Renzetti Place.
Renzetti, it's Hillview.
Hillview,
It's Hillview and Renzetti.
okay, all right,
that runs
Yeah.
right into the path.
right.
All right, so we can, let's, Brad, you want to just add that to?
12.7.
Yeah, because,
My quick response to the folks there, so you're not, I will respond, but I'm gonna wait for the item to come up on the board agenda when it comes up.
right.
Regarding the retiree health insurance.
So it's best if we can just, we're gonna wade through some more work, but it's the healthcare issue is on the agenda, and we will have a full discussion at that point. Rather than just responding, then we can bring in and have a full discussion of the board. So we will, I think we're gonna withhold comments, just responses to what was said here for a few minutes. But I think we do want to get a discussion or the item regarding the stop sign for responding to that public comment tonight. So we're going to do some other items, and then, but we're want to hear from our student reps first. So very good. The guy, go ahead.
All right, I'd like to say I was very moved by multiple of the past speakers. And on kind of a rocky transition, some news at the high school. Rent School Edition was announced as our new spring musical. Students voted on which musical will be performed in the spring using an electronic ballot that was sent to all of our school emails. And the two options were Little Shop of Horrors and Rent School Edition.
This Thursday, the ICSD Brain Team is hosting our annual trivia night, in which teams of up to 6 can compete in a trivia competition. And so entry is $10 per person, which comes with unlimited food as well as a shot to win prizes. And it'll be held in the ICSD cafeteria from 6:30 to 8 p.m. and tickets will be sold at the door. So we hope to see you there.
Just some upcoming dates for the board and people at the meeting to be aware of. The IHS Orchestra is having, tonight, a fundraiser at Chipotle. A choir concert and chorale will be having their combined concert next Wednesday at 7:30. Orchestra will be having its concert Tuesday the 11th, and band Tuesday the 18th at 5:30. The weekend of December 7th, the student-directed one act will be shown at the IHS Black Box Theater. And tonight, the commitment signing ceremony took place after school for student athletes committed to play at a D1, D2, or D3 school in the Clement Golf.
I couldn't write that fast, but we'll, the Fine Arts Boosters will get those dates out to us shortly, so. Anything else that go ahead? Okay, very good. We'll move on. And consent agenda, multiple pages.
I'll move the consent as presented.
Second.
Second by Maura. Anything we need to highlight? Usual business.
Usual, we've got a couple of small grants, from Cornell, from IPEI.
$500 from Cornell, was it?
Yeah.
Don't want to break the bank at Cornell, but that's okay. All right. We appreciate any and all. Okay.
Exactly.
There's a $34 donation from Tops Groceries.
Yeah, I didn't see anything from Wegmans.
I know, it's $34 more dollars than Vikings. Wow.
It could definitely be seen as a conflict of interest, however, I believe that my time's volunteer would be an equal compensation, but I'd be more than happy to write a check.
No,
Very well stated, Mr. Malcolm.
all right, there is, if we go, there are multiple pages there, but, and we're not gonna hold Chris to making donations. That's a private action, and we appreciate that, Chris.
Thank you, Roger.
So we good? Move seconded, all in favor? That is everyone, and we are eight? We're eight, and Pat is indisposed. Just really quickly, if we just run down the work session reports, and as we move on to other items, but Ann, what's
Well,
going
our
on?
main project that we're working on is the health insurance reserve legislation, which we've been looking out for a year now. And Elgin and I went to Albany, I guess, the first week in December, and we met with members of
November.
No, it's first Friday in
Went,
Went.
that's past tense.
When?
The first week in December is.
Oh, yeah, November, that's right. You're right, time
We're
didn't
time
fly.
traveling.
I mean, I'm time traveling.
Just check.
Anyway, where did the time go? Anyway, and we did meet with members of the executive branch, and we followed that up with information that they had requested. They try to keep that meeting on, and they continue to work on trying to set up some additional meetings with hopefully so that is what we've been primarily concentrating on.
Thanks, Ann. Facilities, Brett.
Facilities is continuing to work on major projects coming forward for a vote in May. We have our first community discussion on those tomorrow evening, I believe.
Correct.
At the Tompkins County Library. So we're making progress there. First phase will be a good number of changes to school entrances throughout the district. If you've seen the change in the door at Caroline with the two doors, it'll be a similar arrangement, but obviously each of the buildings is architecturally different, so it can't be identical, but there'll be some changes there. Projects will include a number of things at the high school, including making some changes to the entry, or where you enter, where you're welcome at the high school. And some work on some of the athletic facilities. But there'll be more about that as we go ahead. We hope to have a plan in place by February so that we can go to the voters in May with that. So we're working on that. Finance, since that's next on the agenda. We're continuing on the budget process. I know at the last meeting you saw how we're challenged over the course of the next 5-7 years with constrained revenues by a tax cap, and what that means, depending on what you want to assume about pay increases for employees over the course of the next few years, and how large the gap could be there. So we're looking at that, obviously, but also working on the budget. It's a year-round process, and we meet with a different group each month for information and input into the budget process.
And we're going to be voting on the budget calendar.
And the budget calendar is to be voted on tonight? Yes.
And that's on the agenda as well. Moira, HR.
Okay, well, I usually rely on looking at the minutes for the meeting as an aid to failing memory, but I can't seem to get logged on. But human resources, one of the things that we've spent time on at several meetings is recruitment and retention, and specifically looking at a report and a plan that was put together by a group quite a few years ago. At this point, we decided that the most efficient way to go about that was to have our paid employees review that plan and give us an updated report on where we are with initiatives and suggested plans, and with suggestions of where we need to go next.
Very good. Curriculum, Eldred, any updates?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be talking about curriculum later, I believe.
So, what we've decided to do this year is carve out some key areas in which a tremendous amount of curriculum work happens. Literacy, building an anti-marginalization curriculum, STEAM, science, technology, art and math, that's what A and STEAM is for. We now have been instructed that art is certainly a part of the STEM effort. We began this year, after deciding on that strategy, to dive into the anti-marginalization curriculum. At the last meeting, we were presented with what those of us who watched it can only describe as a transformational video of first graders in Bell Sherman, who were investigated as a project, Columbus Day in particular. They were looking to see which advertisements, which primary sources or information included information about the indigenous population that existed on this continent before the colonizers arrived on the shores. And the kids were incredibly affected, emotionally moved, detail-oriented, angry, wrote letters to the companies in their own handwriting saying, this is wrong. You make it seem like Columbus landed on empty land. My favorite response was by a first grader. I don't know if I can trust anything that's written in your textbooks anymore. And they wrote to the company demanding inclusion, and the company responded. And the response was so indicative of, I just happen to have corporate experience. You can tell that this response had gone all the way up the chain of command, possibly to the board of this company. And it basically said, you got us. We will get back to you each individually with our response after we take this under consideration. And I'm trying to speak, I'm actually trying to use professional language here because these kids were extremely professional in their approach in the way they did this. So the point of all this is that as a measure of development of an anti-marginalization curriculum, we've been led to understand now that there are 25 such projects going on around the district. And the whole purpose is to empower children to investigate themselves. They actually use the word sources, source material, inclusion, exclusion, colonize. This is what they were writing in their material. So the hope is that obviously we evolve this. Maybe next year we have 50 projects. Eventually every child in this district from K to 12 will be exploring what we've now learned are these essential questions about identity, and more importantly, they'll be empowered to request the change that's needed for the society going forward. So eventually we're going to, hopefully exhaust this anti-marginalization piece in our curriculum work and get to the next step. And our leaders will lead us through that process. So it's ready. When Dr. Brown is ready, I'm sure he'll drop that video on all of us, and I get goosebumps thinking about it. That was pretty powerful learning.
Thanks, Steve. Policy, Sean.
Some of the policy work was seen by the board at our last board meeting. Given some of the changes in New York State law, there was a mandate by any entity that had employees to immediately update their sexual harassment policy, which the board did. We will be revising that policy. We were trying to be in compliance with the law, but also trying to make sure that our language was language that we were comfortable with and challenge some of the language that didn't just use legalese, but challenge some of the gender norms, some of the pronoun usage, etc. We were also trying to respond to our audit from the summer, and our auditors were asking us to look at a couple of policies. For example, policies a couple of maybe almost a decade ago had a superintendent's discretionary fund. That policy will be deleted. There was a policy on purchasing that did not set mandates between contracts between $10,000, $1, and $20,000. That has now been, language has been added there, as well as who is authorized in the district for the use of credit cards. In a policy that we will be spending significant amounts of time on as a board coming your way, we'll probably spend some time in facilities as well as in policy, talking about building use and building usage, and who has the right to use school public grounds. Do for-profit organizations have the right to use school building grounds, and what are the rights and responsibilities and the terms of those usages? And so we'll be spending some conversations about that, both under the legal obligations as well as our community expectations. And that's where we find ourselves in the next policy meeting. We'll be meeting, I think, next week, if not sometime soon, the policy committee.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Dr. Brown.
Thank you for the opportunity. Some quick announcements, and to carry on from what Mr. Grandy was referring to. We have the capital project coming up and some community conversations to talk about it. The first one will be tomorrow night at the library in the Borg Warner Room at 5:30. All of these sessions will be at 5:30 to 6:30. The next one will be at Southside on December the 13th, Southside Community Center, and then at Boynton Middle School on January 17th. These dates can be found on our website as well if you click on the news item. Also coming up are community conversations about the equity report card, and that's going to be a collaboration between our school district, EIOC, PTA Council, and the village at Ithaca. And those dates are December 3rd at Enfield at 6 o'clock, December the 5th at GIAC at 6, December the 12th at LACS, and the 28th is going to be at Caroline. And then there's another one, there's one for students only on December the 6th at Ithaca High School. So those dates are all on our website. I just wanted to announce that we have a lot of upcoming community conversations, and we hope folks will come out and engage in conversations about our equity report card and the capital project. Thank you, Ms. Daniels.
Thanks, Dr. Brown. And we're going to move on to school district business, and I would like just to offer a shift in some of the items. There's a few things we have to adopt, which we will get to. I would like to get to item 12.4, the social emotional curriculum update. If we could, we have folks from the high school, et cetera, that wouldn't hurt to have you guys go ahead and get finished up so we can go do other things with your evening. And then let's do if we can, then I would like to do the retiree health insurance discussion and then move on to the rest of the items, if that's
good plan.
Okay, all right. So
high school is actually secondary course redesign.
well, that's so where did that go?
That's 12.5.
Yeah.
There's two. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Right. So let's there we go.
Yeah, we'll do the high school one first.
Right. Let's do so here we go. Let's do high school first, and then
welcome, Mr. Trump.
Yeah, there you go. High school first.
The other people again.
I was get caught.
Yeah, just the one that, this one presented. Great. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. As you all know, but I'll share for everyone, my name is Lily Talcott, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent.
And I am Carlin Gray, I'm the Associate Principal for Curriculum Instruction at Ithaca High School.
And we're here this evening to give you a brief update about something exciting that's happening at our middle and high schools in terms of some changes in courses, especially for you guys. All right, great. So over the summer, Carlin and our professional development and curriculum team were talking about different ways to support our secondary schools, in particular our teachers and students who are really looking for some different opportunities. And Carlin had a fabulous idea of offering up an application to our secondary teachers to allow them to re-envision current courses that they're teaching, also to possibly add or replace out some courses that they're already teaching. So
This secondary course redesign idea is about rewriting courses that perhaps that already exist in our course catalogs, 6th grade through 12th grade, right? Through the lens of our 3 levers. So around culturally responsive teaching practices, so in what ways can we incorporate those more substantively in our course design, inclusion practices, and innovative teaching and learning, particularly around computer science, project-based learning, etc. It's also a course redesign around student voice. So we accepted a number of applications, and through that process, we had students at the table with us using a rubric to determine whether or not they wanted to take said course, right? So our teachers submitted applications, and kids helped us determine whether we were going to move forward with these. And we'll be collecting student feedback throughout. And we're trying to ensure that there are interdisciplinary connections as much as possible throughout. So there are some applications that came to us that connected English language arts and science, for example, together. This actually came out of, so why do this model is a really big question. Considering that we have a pretty extensive program of studies at the high school and at both middle schools and LACS, we have a lot of different courses for students. But we found that we really needed to formalize both the PBL and computer science, inclusion, all of those things. We really needed to have a formal model for getting those into our courses in a really explicit way. And also the need to encourage creative thinking around course design that includes our 3 key levers. And in the past, this type of work has been done through the sabbatics that have been granted to teachers, but also had just been done like at night until 10 p.m. when you were making up a forensics course because you thought it'd be cool. Really just to formalize that process and really make some clear investments in the secondary level around some of our key levers. And also to bring in some of the really high level work that's been done at the elementary level, but to help encourage that more at the secondary level as well. And by that I mean the case study work that's been done at the elementary schools to really make that clear through a lot of creative coursework and project-based learning at the sort of 6 through 12 level. And so as we engage in this process, we just sort of wrapped up the first part of the process, which was getting the proposals through basically a student-led committee, and then moving those courses forward to sort of the practical implication of putting them into the program of studies, getting a timeline set for teachers to be engaged in the process both during some school time and some paid out of school time, to really formalize how those courses are going to be developed, and how we can help support people in developing curriculum that is innovative and creative and interdisciplinary. So we got a really nice selection of courses. I think if you wanted to share some.
Right.
I don't know, I'm just invisible with scrolling.
There we go.
Dr. Brown, appreciate it. Got a few examples here. So Espanol 8, for example, at Boynton is going to be rewritten with a much stronger lens on global education and creating links to classes around the world based on projects. They talk specifically about working together to create sort of teams of students to communicate with Spanish-speaking students around the world, and really just felt very invested in that.
So the teachers that proposed it, the Bridge Max teachers?
Mm-hmm. And they're planning to have a much more of a cultural focus in addition to a computer science focus. So they're going to leverage computational thinking and our digital tools in order to help make some of those connections. So some other ones include principles of robotics. So right now at the high school, you can be involved in robotics, but it's a pretty extensive after-school commitment, and there's no coursework that's designed specifically for students who can't make that after-school commitment to Code Red. So that was proposed by two female math teachers that are very vested in getting more girls into robotics, because the robotics program, although there are lots of girls involved, is still dominated by a lot of our male students, which is great, but we wanted to also bring that into our school programming to be more inclusive. Personal finance was actually put forth twice by two different teachers at the request of many students, I think, because kids are always saying, why don't we learn about credit cards or buying cars or hedge funds or anything useful or Roth IRAs, and I didn't learn about this until my parents told me to do,
Currently, we do not, there's no avenue to.
So there's a basic economics.
There's about to be.
Yeah, but both proposals that got put forward were about the basics of finance, but also about sort of this extended view of personal finance and leveraging money in creative and useful ways, but also included the basics around how credit cards work. Another example is advanced Spanish and French. So this is the language department at LECS working on a 2-year project-based language programming.
Right.
They don't have as many advanced language program options.
So they'd like to rewrite that and connect it to their project structure and their trips structure in more meaningful ways. Again, they're looking at more of a cultural focus and also connecting with school and communities in Spanish-speaking and French-speaking countries, and then having students work toward visiting those schools, those communities. So that's part of what they're working on. At this point, we could give you a few more examples, but you probably have some questions and we'd be happy to answer those.
So I have one question about what kind of support you need to make it get to the next step. In particular, like I'm looking at principles of like robotics, and you said they're coming from a different department, right? Like the math department. So how would you work like with the tech program, and how what are the kind of your vision for like the building or the designing, and how would you work collaboratively across the disciplines?
Well, some of that's going to be involved in our first series of meetings with the teachers in terms of looking at helping them design a syllabus and then thinking backwards, like what are your goals for your students, where do you want to be with them, let's design a syllabus, and then let's think about all the materials and supplies and needs. So the first part of the process is just sort of laying out the cores in terms of the learning goals, and then thinking back through sort of supplies. And some of that, we can pair with the tech and science departments in terms of budgets, because the math department has a budget for like, what do you use in math? Protractors. And tech and science have a large budget, right? So looking at that sort of critically and reallocating, like maybe we're gonna have to reallocate some funds to support materials or supplies based on the course that you go. But we're not gonna do any of that until we really have like a course syllabus in order and sort of a sequence of units and a sequence of learning targets.
And so that if it crosses over like departments, you'll find some way to facilitate.
Yeah, whether budgetarily or with PLCs, like having our teachers meet. But one of the limits I said about robotics in general was that all of this is after school from 5 to 9 during robotics season, right? So it's a pretty limited but high level commitment. Yeah, it would mean pulling in or leveraging some of our people who are involved in robotics for sure into the course design process. So like pulling them in as part of one of those sessions for those people as well, which we're certainly willing to do.
Pete, go ahead. I've seen the first graders. It is a very good thing you're doing this. You would not want to deal with those kids. The way we teach now, let me tell you. This is very exciting. I have a question. Are the teachers, I mean, you selected obviously the right teachers, right, to start this process with. I imagine they're really excited to get away from the thing they have been doing so consistently for the last whatever years. So can you talk about how the teachers have responded to this?
The responses and the feedback that we've
Yeah.
received has been overwhelmingly positive. To have an opportunity to work together and to have paid out of school time in order to craft these well is something that's welcomed, certainly. We also see this really connecting, as you saw earlier, to a lot of our district initiatives that a lot of teachers have been excited about, and also wondering how they can incorporate this really well. So we see this seamlessly connecting to things like mental health that Mary Grover's going to talk about later. We see this seamlessly connecting to our anti-marginalization curriculum seamlessly as well. So I think people welcome that opportunity as well, to have concentrated time to figure out how to make those connections and infuse it within the work they're already doing. So another example that that's up there is 8th grade social studies.
I was just gonna say that, it's
I
like,
was going to ask.
yeah,
They're ready, they're ready to take, as opposed to taking a strictly chronological approach, they're ready to take much more of a thematic or big idea approach, right? And create the timeline as they go, as they discuss connections among different historical events through a given lens. Say the lens is culture,
Right.
right?
I just think it's important for the public to hear that our teachers are not being dragged, kicking and screaming. They're actually,
well,
personally, probably have been far out ahead of this for a long time and waiting for us to give them the freedom to actually be teachers.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, just to add on to what Lily was saying about 8th grade social studies, is that all of the course proposals brought with them a level of enthusiasm, and then if courses are not gonna move forward, we said, you know, apply next year, or we may be able to make this, because there were some courses that we couldn't put forward due to, you know, all of the constraints that exist within scheduling, and supporting all of that, but everybody was excited to be involved and think that we have a clear process for reinvigorating or revising or upgrading. It's sort of like upgrading your closet, like a one in, one out kind of thing. Well, maybe only women do this. It's always like, don't bring any more shoes in the house, but it feels very much like we're invigorating, but we're also trying to look at courses that maybe have run their course, so to speak, or have been around for a really long time, and the person who created that course maybe is no longer there. So there's a lot of courses at the high school like that. Botany was a good example. It was taught by a math teacher, and it had sort of run its time, and we moved on to other things. And so there's some natural element of rollover for courses, and there's some push here. So we're trying to do both, sort of like a push and pull kind of thing in terms of reinvigorating the program of studies, but also keeping in mind that we don't want to have 400 courses, because that makes it really challenging.
Let's see, did I miss the timeline? Let's talking about timeline.
So
when are,
right now we're
when
putting
can I
together.
take this?
Yes.
Right.
When can you take environmental ethics? So right now we're putting together programs of studies and offerings that go into next year's courses. So the late winter and spring will be big time investment from the professional development crew at the district level in structuring sort of the work with these people, considering that they're all going to be working on different things. That we just really need to be deliberate about how that time is structured and what the goals are.
And the extra stipend is for how much time? I heard something about.
Yeah, right now it's budgeted for about 12 hours.
Right, okay. All right. And you've determined that's at least a start.
Yes.
To compensate for.
That's
12.
more than we've ever had before.
Right, so it's just a question of how much where you go from.
Yeah, and I think like all things that'll get people started in a framework, and off to at least a couple of units into their course, or a, reorganization of their course.
There's also release time as well that we see.
Okay, right.
Yep.
Which is subs, people will come in as subs, yeah.
Sure.
So it's a combo.
Other questions?
Would you be able to speak to student involvement in the process?
Yep. We went to student council, and I said, hey, this is happening, we really need more students and adults at the table, and they all showed up. No, it didn't really go like that, but we had.
The candy helped.
Yeah, we bribed them. No, we had, I think it was around 5 or 6 kids at the table, and similar number of adults, and every time we went through a proposal, the first question was, what do you think? Would you want to take this class? Or would your peers want to take this class? Or, where is your interest in terms of, can you imagine people taking this? And they were really honest about where the interest was, and especially around something like personal finance, like everybody was on board with that one.
Are they staying with the process? Like if they were there for helping choose it, but where are they?
I mean, they're more than welcome to be invited into any of the design processes. It may be that we interview them before the process and say, okay, if this is the course, what would you want to see, and then deliver that to the staff, because it may be a little complicated. We need to involve them in the nitty gritty, but okay, given that you put these courses forward, like, what would you like to see?
Was there any kind of push to reach out to students who may not necessarily be so engaged with certain subjects? Just thinking, going back up to the top in terms of trying to be more inclusive and culturally responsive to what different students want.
Absolutely, yeah. So Carlin was great about recruiting, in addition to some Carrie Brindisi, the science department leader as well, making sure that we had students who were also not a part of student council.
Yeah.
Who are sometimes the first kids to say, why am I learning this? Or I'm not really particularly interested in this. So we were thoughtful to make sure that their voices were at the table.
Sean, go ahead.
Nicole just did a follow-up question. I'm glad to hear we need to put structures in place and obviously provide resources to make the kinds of changes and the kinds of changes that we want to be. And so part of helping provide our teachers with the time so they don't always have to do it on their own after hours. That part we know. But to be as student-centered as possible. And so it's one thing to go off teacher interests, which we know, but we're also at a point in time where we have to start thinking about what are the ways in which some of our students may be thinking about what they need. And I love student council. I'm embarrassed to say I was student council vice president when I was back in the day. Well, true story, it is what it is. And so, but I know that it's also a particular type of student who oftentimes gets engaged in that way. And so what does it mean for students who are not engaged? And what kinds of classes may they be looking for? And so I'm just trying to think about how we're engaging with students who may not be always at the table.
Yeah.
So thank you for the question.
And our students that were not, always putting themselves at the table, they really had a voice in the process, and any reticence there, we really took under consideration. And the one student I'm thinking of, she said, well, I'm not sure, and as her first reaction in going through our proposals. So we really did listen to that as some of that reluctance came out about particular proposals.
The other thing too, several of our proposals included survey information from last year. They had surveyed students about what types of classes they would like to take. These were Regents classes, Regents honors, mixed classes, et cetera. And so they were able to cite quotes from kids who always wanted to learn more about X. So that helps in the process as well.
And the last thing I'd say is that besides the advanced Spanish and French, which sort of fits a need at LACS, none of these courses are leveled, or, it's not an additional AP course, or none of them were designated for a particular level of student. That was really important as we were considering how students, if there would be prerequisites or limiting factors as kids were coming in. Because anything that required some level of prerequisite was kind of off the table because it would limit who could come in. There were courses written for certain grades, but again, we're trying to.
Anything else?
And are students able to propose a class themselves?
I think that's probably the next iteration.
Not yet.
I think that would certainly be a different way to run it, because then we would be looking for either a instructor to take that on or somebody, to adopt that, but it would certainly be a way to get more student interest next year. But I like that.
Well, because you said that with the personal finance, that was students' ideas. So will you accept more student ideas and then?
Oh yeah, and I think that had come from 2 separate departments, from 3 separate educators. So at some point there was a lot of student feedback about what you wanted to learn as you exited high school, or what you wished you had known. And some of that is just from listening. So, yeah, but I like that idea. I like flipping the script on that. What's your course, Josh?
I don't have anything in mind.
For next time. I was never a student council guy, but I get to say thank you, Carlin, and thank you, Lily, for all your work, and we look forward to what's next. And we'll just switch quickly to Mary Grover for the
Social emotional
another
learning.
more curriculum updates, and then
Thank you for having me, and giving
Thanks,
me the opportunity to talk about social emotional learning in the city school district right now. So we have a number of things. What I want to talk about tonight is a few things that have been happening and that are continuing, and then the rollout of some new ways to embed social emotional learning into all of these wonderful things that are already happening and enhance those efforts. So the work that continues, there continues to be responsive classroom training, which is really, you see in instructional strategies such as morning meeting, where you're building community, students are getting to know one another, and you're getting to know them as an instructor. And then second step in zones of regulation are throughout the elementary schools, and all of our buildings had the opportunity to update their materials. And in addition to that, BOE has a really robust plan this year. They've started the second step happening throughout the building. The therapeutic crisis intervention in schools is a program that we've been in this 4-day training that happens in the summers that's open to all staff. And so we have had a number of ESPs, administrators, clerical teachers take this. And the idea is to really be self-aware, name your emotions, know what you're feeling, and how to de-escalate a situation. And it's an intensive 4-day training. So the trainings that are offered throughout the school year right now are workshops that are TCI informed for after-school training for staff to continue to build upon their strategies. Lions Quest is present at DeWitt Middle School. And then we have the social emotional learning that's embedded in the case study and project-based learning work. So an example of that would be a kindergarten case study talking about who am I, and exploring my identity, what I feel, when I feel it, why do I feel it, all of that. So really not separating social emotional learning is another thing, but again, that it's embedded. And then we have the continuation of the tools that we experienced with Dr. Ross Green, and through as we support students and families navigating challenging situations, or teachers navigating challenging situations, a whole class, which essentially Ross Green is, students do well if they can, so what are we gonna do to support that? And that continues. And then next week, Dr. Shrocky Holly's coming back. And so he'll be here 3 more times this year. And staff, instructional leaders are working, getting their team signed up. So the big vision, so that's what's continuing. And adding on to that is this idea that in our learning communities in our district, we will have self-aware adults who know what they're feeling and why they're feeling it as they're teaching, modeling that. Students will have the ability to really explore what am I feeling, why am I feeling it, and then grow a capacity to self-regulate as we move through a variety of emotions throughout our day, and that is a great thing. That's how we know we're engaged. And so socially emotional, intelligent learning communities have really engaged students who are learning more. So that is the vision. So the next piece with the ruler approach, this is an embedded approach that is out of Yale. Their Social Emotional Intelligence Center is founded by Dr. Mark Brackett. And the aim is in learning communities to grow the social emotional intelligence. So you're pulling students who've been pushed to the margin back to the center. There's a recentering your learning community where students are recognizing their emotions, understanding them, naming them, being able to label them, and regulating them. So this approach is a pre-K-12, and it's something that can be used and infused with what's already happening. And so in March, teams, our instructional leaders have been asked to go to their buildings and find a leadership team to attend the 3-day workshop to plan how they're going to use ruler approach in their schools with what they're already doing. And then there'll be consultants that they'll have access to throughout the year. So the last thing, of course, before all of this, we know that 2 decades of social emotional learning research that's happened, that student voice and asking students first what would be helpful before we embark on new strategies is really important. And so the schools that have implemented social emotional learning really well have done that. And so from now until March, we're asking instructional leaders to look at the data they have in front of them. What evidence of student voice do they have? What have students already told them through surveys, through classroom conversations that they need to feel safe in their learning community and highly engaged. And then within that plan, when we go in March and we have ideas, come up with ideas, want to make shifts, how will we know what does success look like and sound like, and what data points are we going to use to assess this in the next year and beyond? What questions do you have?
Go ahead, Ann.
Well, I was wondering, a lot of things that you're talking about, the ones that are already in the district, seem to be ones that are like either in elementary school or middle school, with the ruler one being more all ages. My question is, how do you implement this differently at secondary than you would in an elementary school classroom where you have a single teacher, where there's a different kind of rapport? So how does that play out at, I guess, secondary level?
So it looks different in all classrooms, elementary and secondary, but also within a school. Because depending on what teachers identify and students identify as what would be helpful, it's going to look a little different. The common thing is the language. So, and the strategy that in our school, we believe for students to learn and feel safe and thrive, we ... And that there's a bank of vocabulary and specific language we use to describe how we're feeling, to build emotional intelligence. So in an elementary school, doing that in one meeting is one thing. In a social studies class at the high school, that's something you're gonna explore when you're looking at primary documents reflecting colonization. And to track that and be very intentional, I see it, that's how I see it.
Mary, the trauma informed, I can't remember the last phrase.
Trauma informed instruction.
That's right. Dr. Green, Ross Green, those of us who attended his session during the summer were dutifully impressive, right? That's a lot of heavy lifting. It was almost like it was scalpel work, and I'm not used to that in public education. I'm used to seeing people trying to swing at butterflies with hammers. So I'm curious if you could give us a little more about how we can move forward, because I'm in the dark about what we've done to continue that work. Right? Because that was, like, again, you can't do that work and not be really, really good at it. It would almost be worse to see somebody try that who's just been exposed to that for a couple of weeks. So could you walk us through what's been happening to continue to and help our teachers understand, and our counselors, and whoever's going to be doing that work, really grasp what he was trying to get at?
Yeah, so again, we have a vision for the whole district and how that's looking, and where certain buildings are it's different. So for example, the process at the elementary school for response to intervention and identifying students who could use extra supports and a specific plan, and using his tools on how we engage the families and being part of the plan, and it not being I would say a deficit model, but a growth mindset, that this behavior or this challenge is communicating something to us as educators, and it's our responsibility to figure it out by asking them what would be helpful, for example. So that's, I think we see a lot more collaborative meetings that's in elementary right now, and using the tools. The secondary level, bringing the leadership team together right now, and actually tomorrow I had a meeting with the school counselors on not separating the emotional issues we see with that from the academic. So for example, if a student is failing 3 classes, is that an academic issue? That's something much more complex. And so what are the steps we're going to take to address that? Because having separate meetings isn't looking at the whole child as he asks us to do.
Correct.
So what systems are in place to, and how do we use that same system to get student support?
Right. The reason I'm asking specifically is because school name, obviously, personnel name, student, God knows her name, but I've witnessed a child have a meltdown in the schools. And the adults were doing what they could, right, to keep him safe, keep himself safe. Nobody was judging him. There was a concern that the resources being put in that situation were clearly pulling away from what else was happening in the building. But no one there seemed to have the skills at that moment to get him out of it. Right? To either find a trigger or reverse that so he could go back to class, basically. And that's why I'm asking the question. It didn't seem, in that instance, words are important. Choose the right words. I didn't see an investigation of the level that Dr. Green was suggesting we do to find a point of concern for that kid. Right, but more knows, like I said, it was an excellent job done. Do everything but that. But he was still doing his thing without anybody having the key to unlock what was happening and pull it back. So that's why I'm asking about the continued efforts to have somebody, at least one person in every building should have that really, really challenging training. Like, be able to take that kid aside and figure out what's going on.
How do we, I feel in some ways we're asking our teachers and our staff to be psychologists or to have those skills to be able to unpack those emotions. How do you assess if teachers are gathering those skills, if they're able to do more than just keep a child safe?
That's a great question. So how you assess it, a lot of it is aligned in the Danielson rubric that we use to assess teaching and a safe classroom community. And I feel that when teachers are self-aware, they'll be able to say, oh, I've noticed a shift. So, for example, in post-observation conversations with teachers, when I would say, I noticed all the students, you kept your community together. So-and-so struggled, a peer came over and redirected them. And you continued to move forward with the classroom conversation. And they said, yeah, they're just getting better at it. No, actually, they're not just getting better. You're doing something really intentional. You were really intentional with the grouping. You were really intentional with who you sat, how you made the groups, who you had strategies when you got frustrated, what you're going to say to each other to support each other. So I think, how do we know if teachers are, or how do we know if it's getting better, is through conversations and looking at student work and being really curious when we walk through schools. So when we're seeing students who are disengaged and struggling, what's the conversation that happens after? Well, I'd be curious, what was the problem solving that happened after that got at this behavior's telling us something? Because right in the moment isn't the best time to necessarily to talk to them. I'm not sure, did I answer your question?
Anything else?
Work in progress, that's it. It's a continually improvement process.
Yeah, because I do think too, the plans that are developed, that you make, you follow with fidelity, they work until they don't.
And it's a mindset too. Ms. Harris, you and I were in a meeting about a couple weeks ago where these same behaviors were being characterized as the issue with the kid. We as a community and a culture, we have been in a lot of these conversations. These things happen and everyone rallies to debrief what we can do better the next time. At the end of the day, no theory or framework or book is going to be a silver bullet for every situation. As Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit. So these things happen, we need to experience them so that we have more tools in our toolbox next time they happen again. And in no situation am I hearing folks in this organization blame kids. We have all the right kids. We're getting better at navigating the emotions and the academic issues that are going to be consistently challenging for us.
Yes, I was on display. It was good to see.
Martha?
Yes, I just want to say something from the perspective of being an educator for a long time. And in the years that I've been on the board particularly, I've had many experiences where I thought, wow, it's really hard to be a teacher now. It's harder than it used to be. You know, teachers have to have all kinds of knowledge, right? This deep and broad content knowledge, but knowledge about systems, about emotional intelligence, knowledge about trauma, knowledge about things that kids are going through to a much larger degree, I think, than they used to. So have had that experience a lot. But what I see as we're addressing what teachers need to know and know how to do, that what used to be really frustrating will no longer be as frustrating, because teachers will have the tools and know how to deal with it, rather than just going home and screaming at their husband about what the lousy kids did today. So, I find this all to be very necessary and very proactive to dealing with the enormous challenges of trying to educate children today.
Necessary, but also a mandate. I mean, from the state, that we create and implement, and is there?
We're gonna do it because it's great for kids, and lead with that.
I think it's really important. I think it really is such an, I mean, I think that the social emotional piece, it's kind of so fundamental to being able to be receptive to children. And so I'm really happy, I'm really excited.
Partly my point was, well, we should do this work, and frankly, we really have an obligation to do this work, so the teachers and all staff have the tools necessary, and it's up to us to make sure that, well, the work you're doing, and obviously, and others, to develop this curriculum. So.
Well, thank you for all the support around it.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. So very good. So let's, now we're ready for the retiree health insurance item on the agenda.
To kick off the discussion, I'll move the resolution as presented with the date change that's shown in board docs.
I need a second. Second by Moira, and now please weigh in, respond.
Sure.
Go ahead, Brad.
So let's see, we've been talking about healthcare at the Finance Committee every month for the last 2 years. So this is not a new topic in any way to us. Having to do this, we need to change to self-insurance. Part of the reason to go to self-insurance is to make a change in the retirement healthcare. A year ago, more than a year ago, we made the offer of the Hartford plan with an option to stay in the Blue Cross Blue Shield. That was actually done out of caution to assure ourselves that what we were being told by our consultants was correct, and that the plan would be as good or superior to the Blue Cross Blue Shield administered plan. What we've learned over the course of the time is that in fact it is a superior plan to the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. And so at this point, we're proposing to switch everyone, all the retirees, to it. It produces lower costs for the taxpayer and better coverage for the retirees. So it's a win-win type of situation. I've heard the comments about people wanting to stay with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I understand that. But what I didn't hear was anything about coverage that would be different, or that would in any way you would be harmed. All I heard was I wanted to stay with it. I didn't hear a particular piece of coverage that was going to be worse in some way, or a change that was going to be worse in some way. There were comments about us honoring our promises. We are honoring those promises. You're getting the retirees, 650 of them already on it, who are happy with it, are getting better coverage. So we're certainly honoring the promise to be at least as good as what the actives are getting. In fact, slightly better. So that's why we're coming forward with this. We'd like to move ahead with it. There's significant savings. And it's just, we're bending the cost curve, as we've been trying to do over the last couple of years with going self-insurance. uninsured, health costs will continue to rise. We can't change that. The question is, can we bend the cost curve and have them rise much more slowly? And so far, that's worked for us. We are bending the curve so that it's less. So for those reasons, that's why this proposal is in front of you and why I'll be supporting it.
Can I ask some clarifying?
Sure.
We are obligated to provide a platinum plan, fully insured platinum plan.
To the actors.
To the actors. And to the retirees. Is
not-
it not
The
a,
contract doesn't specify that it be a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan.
well, no, but
Yes,
a
it does.
fully insured
Yes, it
plan?
does.
Yeah.
Meaning,
It could be
Mentioned in
self-insured
the
as well.
contract, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
meaning, well, I mean, for the retirees.
Yeah.
There is no cost to it.
There's cost, depending on
No,
when you retired, Rob. And now now you wanna get out into the weeds, and it depends on
Well, we
when
have-
you retired and which union you were in, what you pay. For many, they're not paying. For some, they are, and
Well,
some
it
pay.
depends, right?
And, yep, I'd say it depends on when you retired, depends on which, union you were in. So, those who are paying less under the Hartford.
And that's what we've seen.
That's what we've seen, and they're actually getting better coverage, so they're paying a little less money, and they're getting better coverage for
Can
it.
you define better coverage for them?
There were a couple of,
Well, there we go.
I can define
somebody who's
better
on,
coverage.
somebody who's on the coverage.
Let me start sort of at the beginning though, saying that this is very difficult for me. Because most of the people I heard from tonight are people I've known for a long time and have had very happy personal and professional relationships with. And so people I know, respect, and care about are asking me to do something that I cannot do. And it is a matter of integrity. As a board member, I took an oath, and a big part of my responsibility is a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the district's funds are managed effectively and ethically and in the best interests of the students of the district. Our legal advisors have convinced me that we are meeting our contractual obligations towards retirees, that the Hartford provides equal or superior coverage to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I have been on the Hartford now, having been on Blue Cross Blue Shield. And my experience is that it is better coverage. I do pay a premium. My premium is less than I was paying when I was on Blue Cross Blue Shield. In addition, I do not pay any co-pays. So in the time that I've been on the Hartford, I have not paid a penny for anything except for my prescription co-pays. I spend 3 months going 3 times a week to a physical therapist. I did not pay a dime. I've had MRIs and x-rays, seen orthopedists and gastroenterologists and not paid any money. Also, I have not had a single wrinkle in my experience. It has been absolutely seamless. So what I'm hearing from a lot of people is fear that it's not going to be as good, and a lack of trust in the district's commitment that if there are unforeseen gaps or glitches, that the district will make sure that the retiree does not pay a single penny more than they would have paid if they were on Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, if there have been problems, or if in the future there are these glitches, we want to know about it. And I do trust, because I've been with people who work for the district or are consultants, and I trust that there is an absolute commitment to make sure that that the Hartford works as well for retirees as Blue Cross Blue Shield does. And our financial advisor and our financial people have demonstrated to us that we have had substantial savings from the shift of 616 retirees to the Hartford. And the estimate that I've been given is that if the remaining retirees are shifted, that will represent a savings of about $100,000 a month. And
That
I-
sounds insane.
Doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, tells you how expensive the plan is.
And so, our last board meeting, we had a presentation on the long-term financial picture for the district going out 5 years. Dr. Brown talked about wanting to give a 10% raise to our employees over the course of 3 years. Yet at the same time, we looked at our revenue and our expenditures for that period, and we were looking at a $5 to $6 million gap in being able to do that. I found it very bleak. And so I am trusting the numbers that I am looking at. I don't see why they would be misrepresented. I know Paul Mintz's objections have been noted. I read them very carefully. I asked a lot of questions, and there are people who are in a much better position than I to speak to the fact that Paul's comparisons are flawed, and that he is comparing our self-insured plan with the fully insured Hartford plan, and they're very different. So, I mean, the bottom line is that the savings that we can glean from this shift are, I find it would be irresponsible of me to not use those savings in the best interests of our students, as long as we are fulfilling our contractual obligations, which I'm convinced we are.
E, go ahead.
So, I just want to commend and thank Maura, like she said, this is personal for her. Right? She's of the age, and she's dealing with people she's known for a long time. That's not my situation. I'm not 65, I'm not close to her. But I have parents, right? And I have people in my family who've had to make the same decision. And thinking about this as much as we thought about it, I understand the trust issue. Trust issue simply because we're a large organization and we have power, which you clearly don't have, right? So that's the history of negotiations there as well. Those trust issues are going to be difficult for anybody to sit here and overcome, right?
Even with a signed document and.
Well, the signed document was to provide a certain level of service, right? We can choose
No, that
how to do that.
wasn't.
Talking about the opt-out.
I'm talking about the outcome, yeah.
About what?
The opt-out.
But we have signed it. It was for Blue Cross Blue Shield. It wasn't for some other acceptable level of service.
That's debatable. And
No,
we
it's
can have
not,
that
no.
conversation.
It clearly is not debatable. It's there in black and white. Did you read it?
I've read so much about this over the last.
No, did you read what we signed?
I've read so much about this over the last 2 years.
It doesn't answer the question. Take a look at what
The
we were,
opt-out.
take a look at what we were asked to sign in order to make the choice that then was an irrevocable choice. No?
It was never presented as irrevocable on our side. That, as Brad
You wrote it.
mentioned, yeah. The reason that we had that option, I mean, we talked about just making everybody go to the Hartford and believing, and still do believe, that under the contracts we could do that. Why didn't we do it? In part, as Brad said, is to make sure that what we were being told by our consultants was in fact true, and that it was going to be as good, and that it would provide us with savings. And I have to say, the other reason is just because people were upset, and we were kind of being
Yeah, what were you kind
soft.
of being?
What's that?
I said,
Soft.
what were you kind of being?
We were like, we feel bad people are upset, even though we're absolutely convinced that this is gonna be good for us, or we're very convinced it's going to be good for us. But we didn't want to deal with a lot of people being really upset. In some ways, in retrospect, it feels like we made a mistake, because now we're dealing with the same emotions again, it's emotional.
It's
and
a
that-
document that's signed.
We have a poor process. The unfortunate thing, we've been in a poor process, but the unfortunate thing about this process is it's not supposed to be this. It's just the poor way in which it happens. It's supposed to be the board deliberating. My apologies for stopping the process of back and forth. I understand, but we're in the middle of a board meeting, and the board is supposed to be deliberating. If we ask questions, that's one thing, but it's not supposed to be this. It's poor, I get it, but it's the process is at this point in time.
But it sounds like they haven't even read or seen this document.
They have, just because they didn't answer the way in which you wanted to, doesn't mean that folks haven't read the document.
Somewhere we're gonna take you off the hook for
Thank you.
that. You've weighed in, and we
I
appreciate it.
didn't finish what I was trying to say. So now we have a year's worth of information, we have a year's worth of facts, we have a year's worth of circumstances. And one thing that I don't know if we communicated clearly to the public, but the Hartford has 1 million similarly situated who are on this plan. That gives us a tremendous amount behind the scenes information and scenarios. And I wish we could somehow present similar scenarios to all of you, but one, there probably is no scenario that fits yours exactly. However, as we sat here and went all through all of the permutations of possibilities, in network, out of network, experimental this, known procedures for that, total accumulated insurance run, right? And then I could continue to go on. There's no circumstance in which we could find that the service is not equal to or better. 1 million people. It's a lot of information and data.
Chris, did you want to say?
And I'm probably going to reiterate what everyone else has said. This is one of those difficult situations where your healthcare is extremely personal to you. And when an entity comes in and makes a decision, honestly in your best interest, but it seems businesslike, the feeling seems to come out of it, and that's not the case. There's a lot of feeling, that's why we've gone through and held back. But like we've said, over time, we've seen the results. We wanted to give it time to see if it indeed was true that the Hartford was a better plan. And it makes no sense for us to continue expending this much money every month for a robust, better plan. And I understand, we have parents, who are going through health insurance situations that we're managing with them. And I understand and I can feel your fear. And I understand it's a security thing as well. And I don't want to minimize that. And however, we also have an obligation, and we're keeping our word, to provide you with the best options possible in the best interest of the school district. And that may sound businesslike, or it may sound like it's going against what you wish, but we're actually trying to provide what you wish, in a different way. I understand the names have changed, but we're offering you the same thing. So that's why I support this plan. And the thing that you don't see is the work, the levels and amounts of work that several people have put going over this, reviewing this before it was ever presented. This has been years of work. And to move 65 people to complete this process makes sense. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I feel your emotions and your concern and your fear, and it makes sense. And I don't want to minimize that. You know, for Maura to sit up here and, you know, share what she shared, and quite honestly, I hold Maura very dear, and her opinion matters to me very much. And I would never expect her to put herself at risk for the sake of the board. So, you know, that's why I support this. And we don't take it lightly to transition health insurance coverage. And I want to really stress that. This is not taken lightly. But when, you know, we have taken several actions over the course of years to improve the operations of the school district and been successful at it. And we're going to continue to try to do that with our best interest possible.
Anything else, Ann?
I feel like I'm just gonna kind of reiterate what everybody said, is that I think it is really an emotional thing. And I think the commitment that was made was the commitment that you would have the same level of health insurance coverage. And so in making transition, it will be the same level of health insurance coverage. And correct me if I'm wrong, under both scenarios, Medicare is the primary insurer, correct?
Yes.
So 80% of it isn't changing actually at all. It's the 20%, it's the 20% that's changing, not the 80%. So your core is actually exactly the same. And the other thing that I find actually rather kind of interesting is that the Hartford, I know it's all it's an insured plan. So in some ways, it's a more simple, straightforward, kind of predictable plan. And so that's another thing that I like about it, and it wraps around what this core Medicare that you would have one way or another. It sort of makes a lot of sense, and I think that it just, I don't know, insurance, it's first of all, the whole health insurance world is incredibly complicated, and all those numbers, and it's like it can be very overwhelming. And having spent a fair amount of time really trying to get my head around it, I'm really thinking about those numbers, especially because we've done some thinking within the legislative advocacy around this in terms of the health insurance reserve. I've really spent a lot of time looking at the big picture, and I feel really confident about it, that what the Hartford provides is comparable and meets that commitment that the district made to you. Because that's the promise the district made, that you will have this health insurance at a certain level going forward. And I believe that's what the transition you will have, what you had going forward. So I feel it is keeping that commitment. So.
Anyone else? Sean, you want to?
Yeah, like Moira, I have a number of personal relationships with folks in the audience, and so this is also difficult and personal. Also, having spent a number of years as a teacher in the district, it brings me back to my time of a number of my mentors and deep personal friends, and so it brings me back to thinking about a couple of things. I want to move away from a conversation as if we're trying to slide one insurance policy into another. That's not a helpful conversation for us to have in any way, shape, or form. For me, this is not about fear. What I think this is about, and I'll own part of it, is about a sense of betrayal. That part I get, and will completely own. You were told one thing 10 months ago, and quite flat out, we find ourselves in quite a different position. You heard a financial figure, and I try to be someone who tries to live, to make decisions not based on finances. But you heard a number, and I heard people say that doesn't seem right. Right, it doesn't. The finances around this do not seem right. And so, if you were faced with that level of finance that we're talking about, roughly about $1 million a year, that's significant. That's a number of teachers. That has an impact on buildings. That's a number of buses. If we're talking about this is a $30,000 or $40,000 possible shift we're talking about, then we have a different conversation. We're talking about $1 million conversation for a plan that is impressive. That's the part that I'm having a hard time. So I'm struggling with betrayal, which I'll own, with significant financial fiduciary responsibility. Not some kind of financial responsibility. It is $100,000 a month. You may not like that number, that's the number. Healthcare is expensive, significantly expensive. And so what we've been doing as a board, trust me, is having email debates, cell phone debates, text phone debates, calling each other up, arguments. We've been debating this for at least a year, probably much more intently for the past 3 to 4 months, and without question over the past month having significant conversations. So this is not an easy decision for us to have as well. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next few minutes. You may not like what takes place, but I want you to know this is not something that has not happened, that people aren't just taking this decision, or aren't just having a conversation, and aren't just doing it just because they don't think about it, aren't reading the information, aren't having conversations about it. This is something that we take very carefully. And I also want to remind folks, and I sat here for a minute thinking about, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. They were asking me, like, Sean, aren't you getting ready to go home? I said, go home. I forgot I have a school board meeting where I was expecting people to come yell at me, which happened. That's fine, right? I said, and I volunteer for this. Man, this is great, right? That I remind that we are all volunteers. So, Elder, you were right about power. We find ourselves in positions of power because of what we do. But we all volunteer because we believe in trying to create the best possible school community we can for our district. We don't do it because we're trying to ruin people's lives. That's not why we serve and give 20 hours of our week, every week, to do. So, I don't know if that got us anywhere or if I said anything that made any sense to someone, but there's a pretty big decision that has to be balanced between what the significant financial responsibilities are and the process that we took to get here, which without question could have been better handled.
Amen. Anyone else? Nicole, you want?
I personally struggle, I don't know anyone personally in the audience, but I think what Sean said to me, what Sean said resonated with me in terms of hearing all of you come up here and talk about integrity, and we said that we were going to do this thing, and I have 3 kids, and I think about me giving my daughter an option. I give her options, and then I tell her what's best for her. And she'll tell me, well, I didn't have an option really. You just told me I had options, but I really didn't. So for me, it doesn't sit well with me that we gave you an option and now we're taking it back. And as someone who comes from lower means, I hate that money always comes in a way, and that's pretty much what we're talking about. We're talking about money. And I have a grandmother, and my mother like to tell her what's best for her. So in a lot of ways, I feel like there's a condescending tone amongst the board right now in terms of us telling you what's best for you, and this healthcare is going to be better for you because we've talked to consultants. But there's money that we're talking about, and we all know that money makes the world go round. So I don't think that this is a decision that I feel comfortable making for anyone's health, and I don't think that we handled this correctly. And that's all that I have to say.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll just weigh in very briefly. As I think I said at our meeting last week, our responsibilities to our current employees, our responsibilities and obligations to our retirees are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. That has not changed. Nothing. We are responsible, and the district and the community is responsible for those contracts that were signed in 1981 or whenever, and every tenant and line in those contracts will be honored, and that's what we will continue to do, and that is our obligation, our responsibility as a board, as a community, and there was a school board president in the past that signed those contracts, and the superintendent that did the same, and we are honoring those contracts, and in my role, I sign contracts today, and we will honor those as well. So, but that is our responsibility, and I'm not going to say what's best for anyone, but we will always have that obligation, responsibility to make sure that your health care is is as full and as robust as Moira's is, and I appreciate Moira being very open and in a tough position. And I didn't stop you, Moira, from going there, but I could have. But with Chris, I certainly very, very much appreciate Moira being open and really being very involved with this topic over the last several years. So our obligations have not changed, and that is what you have been banking on for, if you've been retired for 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, or 20 years. You have been relying on the school district to keep up its side of this relationship and this that document and this this bargain between the community and you on what has been promised to you, and that will continue regardless what this vote may be, regardless of whether we there's another resolution in a while changing. Well, we're going to change to the Hartford route. We need to go to a different provider in order to make sure that our obligation is met and our responsibility to you is filled. So it may not always be the Hartford. It is really, and frankly, Blue Cross Blue Shield is a plan administrator. They are, frankly, they're not. They're an entity. They're a company in business, and so is the Hartford. And so that's it's our responsibility and our obligation of the community to you. That is sacrosanct, and that's where I will put my support. I'm out of water. I don't have anything else to say. I'm going to lose my any other comments? There is a motion on the table. It has been seconded. Anything? Oh. Ask and ye shall. It is actually cold. Thank you. And we do have more work to do. Call the question. Move second. The resolution is in front of you. It's been moved seconded. I will ask. All in favor? And that is Rob, Moira, Eldred, Ann, Brad, and Chris. Those opposed and those abstaining will be Nicole and Sean. So it passes. We are 8 and we are 9. We have 6 votes. So thank you all. And we will temper take 7 minutes. There we go. So I did see this on the agenda. So we were at the NISBA conference. Did we go somewhere? Was that New York City thing? Is that?
This was an opportunity just to, because some folks didn't have a chance to go. Any board member want to share resolutions that were passed, anything?
All right.
Resolutions, you want to?
What resolutions were passed? Actually, I counted that out today. God, it seems like a long time. See, it's already this December, right?
Week of the first week of December,
So I said I would print this out, and most of the things that were kind of out there were adopted. Well, I'm just trying to think whether there was anything that really stood out. Okay. The one thing that stood out that was interesting was initially not recommended, and there was a change made to it that made it more amenable to people. So it was Resolution 19, and it was resolved that the New York State School Board Association shall take a leadership role in raising awareness and understanding of the importance of all school district leaders in understanding and taking action to address disproportionality in the education workforce and in student outcomes as it relates to diverse backgrounds. In carrying out this mission, NISBA shall develop training focused on cultural competency and diligently promote, encourage, and
facilitate access to all school boards. So originally, that had not been recommended by the Resolutions Committee because people felt like it was going to be a mandate. And, but it got brought up and it was made less of a mandate and more recommendation, and then as a result, it passed actually pretty overwhelmingly. And most of the other things that were adopted were kind of fundamental ones, you know, renewing and, you know, no more unfunded mandates and things like that. There were a couple of safety ones that were on there. One that passed, it had a fair amount of discussion, but basically was this NISBA's going to support all efforts to improve school safety by limiting or reducing unauthorized access to guns in school. There wasn't too much to object to in that one, but some people, like, I don't quite remember what the counter arguments were, but there were, but that did get adopted. So basically, what this does in the end is it just decides where NISBA puts their energies. So it's not like any of these things actually make a tangible, like all of a sudden this is a law, but it kind of puts where they're going to put their time. And so this kind of gives them a sense of direction. I don't know, Brad, you were on the other side of that table, you want to add?
Right. The only other one was one on guns.
Yes.
Supporting regulations to restrict, I didn't say restrict, I can't recall it, restrict gun access. Unfortunately, the chair cut off debate.
Oh, right, right.
And went straight to a vote without, where the tradition is to ask the floor if you'd like to extend debate. And he went straight to a vote. It got voted.
It got messy,
Yeah, it got
actually.
It passed, but there were a few vocal folks who felt they'd been cut off. It was just unfortunate the way it occurred.
Yeah.
They then brought it back at the end.
And
it's
people
still-
did not want, there was only one person and he felt he didn't get heard and he felt he didn't get the amendment. The whole thing didn't get listened to, and then people voted against letting it kind of get a revote for some reason. I thought the process.
It was, that was the only one that was unfortunate, it was just the process that somebody didn't get heard. But as Ann says, this sets up NISBA's priorities for advocacy in the coming year, what they'll be targeting with the legislation. While we were there, I thought Dr. Brown had the chance to speak a couple times.
Yeah, too much. We had a great session, talking about our work and then some work leading across the state. So, well-attended sessions that most folks had a chance to be in and participate in. Nicole and Eldridge stole the show in my last session, I must say, and Moira added too. So it was a good session.
I missed that one.
Yeah.
The other one was crowded.
No surprise.
I think I would add, walking away from that conference, I realized how far ahead of the curve we are in terms of other school districts, and I know that's really hard for our community or specific communities within our community to hear. That doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work to do, but listening to the struggles of other districts and conversations and words, literally words that they cannot say without me and Eldred having to say, you have to say racism, like, and being accused of calling someone a racist just because I said we had to have a conversation about racism, and the reaction that comes from certain languages or certain words really, really shocked me and made me realize that some of the things that board members have been telling me over the years in terms of like how much farther ahead of other school districts we are. And it's disheartening and it's sad, but I think it's also hopeful.
Nicole, we have found that folks do listen when we are down there, and you do get feedback as you go to others, and that folks will come up and say, you know, I heard you, and regardless of what the subject might be. And as you say, about board meetings, what we talk about isn't talked about. Superintendent talks all the time and basically runs a meeting, and it's the superintendent's meeting, it's not a board meeting, it's really not not the opportunity to get into, well, areas that we did. And they don't, so, yeah, it's one indicator of fairly special community and also students, staff, et cetera, that we get to interact.
And they also come and say, how can we get Dr. Brown to come to our district as our superintendent?
Oh, no, that's,
That happens a lot.
yeah, so that's why I stand in the back of the room. Yeah, I stand in the back room by the door, and
We trip the headhunters over.
it happens, probably.
I'll just add one thing, I'll add one thing to make the connection between these two things. The resolution that you discussed, right, about needing to have some of this training, and what we witnessed was a disconnect around language. And our community's been hard at work, given all our awards for 20 years, trying to come to similar understandings about the language around race, right? Race, oppression, misogyny. And it was a good feeling, though, that the contract we said to our superintendent allowed him to enter that conversation. These other folks may not be positioned to have that conversation because it's still dangerous, because they have not done the work. So, kudos to us, we've been in the trenches doing this for a long time. I don't think we're all still on the same page, but we're getting closer to these, what we mean when we say racism, what we mean when we say race, what we mean when we say oppression, what we mean when we say marginalization. Doesn't mean you have to be intentional, conscious, and do it to me on purpose. This means we're all part of something bigger than us. That's not our fault. And we need to get to the other side.
Good stuff. We don't have to vote on that, right?
No.
So let's move on to read the district safety plan. We do wish to adopt, and I think we need to do this fairly soon, correct? And there was a updated, a bit edited version in board docs that I did see.
It was edited. I'll just briefly go over some of the changes, but I want to assure everyone that a safety plan has been in place for many years and has been followed by all of the buildings. The plan in place, however, hadn't been updated. It's been outdated and missing requirements that hadn't been formally changed in several years. And one example is that a couple of years ago, they changed the number and types of drills, and they, state has changed that. And that and other language was incorporated into the updated plan. Worked throughout last year with the district safety team to update the plan. And worked with TST BOCE's health and safety to ensure that all of the commissioners' regulations were within that plan and the plan is compliant. And one of the reasons that we held a public hearing for this was because the changes within the plan were substantial enough to change the plan and require that the public take a look at the plan. And we received feedback from that. And just as an example, we slimmed down from I think it was the 2010 version, taking out things including like the pandemic flu, which we could probably find again if we happen to be in that situation, but it wasn't necessary to incorporate it in this plan. And what this does is it gets the process back on track to be annually approved by the Board of Education. And I would target probably a July meeting, possibly the reorg meeting for that, just as something that we should do regularly. New York State deadline for safety plans is September 1st, and we're looking to get into compliance with that. Building plans are fully compliant with the district safety plan and with New York State regulations. And I just wanted to say that this is a living document. We don't just shelve it and say that we're done with it. What will happen after the adoption is that we'll reconvene the district safety team and take a look at what needs to be updated next.
Thanks, Mike. Certainly scanning through it, this was a much cleaner looking document. I mean, it flowed, and I can't say I read every word, but I scanned through the whole document. It was.
Did you read it?
I didn't scan.
No, did you read it?
When was the public hearing?
The public hearing was October 23rd.
Right, we had that.
That's blank resolution, that's why I asked.
Yeah, I saw that one. Any other comments, questions?
I'll move the resolution with the date, October 23rd for the
October 23rd.
Second.
Second by Moore, thanks. Any other questions? Sean, anything?
No, like you, it was a much cleaner document. I feel a little better. I still has some things that I question, but if we're saying this is what we need to have, then it is what it is. Some of the items in here, I'm not sure that we've done, or thankfully we've not had to do, but let's keep it moving and we'll have a conversation at the reorg meeting. See you in August.
Or any feedback can come directly to me throughout the next several months while we revise this again.
Okay, yeah. At least we'll get this version adopted. All right. Move seconded, all in favor? That's everyone. Thanks. Thanks, Mike. And budget calendar adoption. We have one. Oh, Amanda's back there. I saw those codes. Sorry, Mary, just.
We don't need to even show it, it's in board docs, discussed it at finance committee. It's pretty predictable, right? We'll be cycling a lot of topics through finance committee, which are open meetings. It'll keep us on task to be able to look at all the different areas of the budget, to ensure that we're talking directly to the folks, principals and directors specifically, that sort of manage those areas of the budget. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting with them, talking about sort of their ideas, if there's any changes that they see. We oftentimes analyze trends, so we look to the past, and then we also then budget for the future. So some of the topics that we'll be covering: special education, pre-K, facilities, transportation, school nutrition, staffing at different buildings. As an aside, just so you know, many of the items we already covered. We started to already talk about the audit report. Angela and I have already developed all of the information that will be going out to the budget developers, again, which are the principals and directors. They are already scheduling meetings with us. We do one-on-one meetings with them about their equipment and supplies budgets. And then we also do a second round of one-on-one meetings with all of them around their staffing and personnel matters. So that's a two-tiered sort of approach that we do in person, so that we really can try to predict what growth they'll be needing in their buildings each year.
Okay. Did I have a motion or anything?
I'll move adoption of the budget calendar as presented.
Second.
Second by Nicole. Okay. Beat Moyer didn't have to do it. Moyer's been doing a lot of heavy lifting tonight, so.
We're doing a lot of heavy lifting.
So thank you. Thanks, Nicole. Move seconded, and that calendar is in board docs and it is everywhere.
And it will
Should
be on the website.
Thank you. After tonight, or
Correct.
all in favor? I think that's, are you good? Did you have?
Just a quick comment that this is an example of the kind of detailed work that's done in preparation for our budget and the ways in which we look at our finances as well. So thank you for the work that goes into this and to the finance committee as well. So I just want to make sure that was
For the record.
For the record.
No, thank you, Sean. Well, I'll vote yes to that. Voting yes on whatever Sean says, and then all in favor?
I'll vote yes.
And, we're gonna vote. So we are adopting the budget calendar as presented. And one more item, I believe we just, last other business would be that letter to the city, letter to the powers that be regarding stop signs. You're gonna.
I'll move that the superintendent to send a letter of support to Ms. Gould's proposal for a stop sign on Hudson Street at West.
Yeah, we'll grab something and I'll shoot you all.
Hillview where it heads eastward to Renzetti.
Thank you, what she
All the
said.
details.
It's in
She
the,
provided many
right.
details.
I'll second it, but with a caveat that it be signed by the superintendent, but also signed by the chair of the facilities committee.
Oh, there you go. Pulling out the big
Big guns.
Big
Carries
guns.
the weight.
Um,
I'm sure that helps.
But I think in terms of board support as well.
He just
But-
put his name down.
I'm just glad not to sign something, so I'm good. I'll vote for that. All in favor? That's, vote in favor on that letter thing going out. And hopefully the city will act on it. Upcoming dates of importance, Dr. Brown, do you have anything to?
With tomorrow night's community conversation at the library, and that's the big one.
Yep, and the first equity report card presentation is out at Enfield. It's Enfield next
Next week,
Monday.
next Monday night.
Next Monday night in place of the PTA meeting out there, so that's good next Monday. Work sessions, et cetera, and before you know it, it'll be Christmas, which is really crazy.
Yeah. All night.
Are we good? Anything else for the good of the group? Can we let everybody go home? Okay. We are adjourned.
Thank you.